Hello, my name is Cialet Fabaha, and today I have for my audience my sister Lonnie here to the side. You can show her there. I have my husband, and then I also have my son here who's with us today. He's recording. All right, so today I will be representing my cultural artifact, which is a Mexican artifact. It is the molcajete. So before blenders, there was a molcajete. I remember when my grandmother used to make the best spices con tortillas using our molcajete. The smell of fresh serrano chili peppers, garlics, and onions sting in the air, strong enough to sting a nose hair and leave a long-lasting, wonderful memory. The molcajete is important because it is a direct tie to my Aztec ancestral roots. People who lived during this time also smell the sense of spices after grinding down chiles using the molcajete. My experience is not original, it is cultural. My cultural artifact represents my cultural identity because it is a kitchen tool that is still used today, carrying with it rich history, deep culture, and a long tradition. I chose this artifact because I am a Hispanic of Mexican origin, and I use the molcajete, and it's a tradition in my family that has been passed down from generation to generation. It connects me to my past, and it helps me better understand my cultural identity. Today, I will discuss how the molcajete still reflects the Mexican culture. Like the old saying goes, you are what you eat, and for me, that is Mexican food. This artifact is directly linked to what I consume on a daily basis and how my ancestors thrived in the past. The molcajete is an ancient tradition, yet still a very useful kitchen tool. First, I will discuss the Aztec origins of the molcajete. Next, I will describe the important traditions that keep the molcajete relevant to Mexican culture. And finally, I will discuss how the molcajete represents cultural survival in the face of erosion. So what is an authentic molcajete, and why is it important to my cultural identity? The molcajete originated from the Aztec culture thousands of years ago during the Mesoamerican times. In the past, indigenous people made stone tools just like this one to grind down vegetation that was readily available in their landscape. According to the book, Life Among the Aztec, published by Elaine J. Hall in 2004, stone was plentiful around the valley of Mexico City. They have huge mountain ranges where they were able to quarry out stone, and with that stone, they were able to make things like obsidian and, of course, the molcajete. The molcajete is a volcanic rock, sometimes referred to as a stone mortar. It comes with a pestle made of the same material called the tejolete. The tejolete is used to smash, squash, and chilies, herbs, and garlic. Knockoffs are usually made out of cement, so you'll be able to tell by that. And then also, if they're not made in Mexico, that's also a giveaway that it's a knockoff. This will change the flavor drastically, and it'll give it a less traditional taste, so try to keep it authentic. The tradition of pouring out stone from the mountainside has been going on for thousands and thousands of years, and it's still going on today. They still have many businesses where they still quarry out stone from the mountains in Mexico, and they make molcajetes just like this. They even have modernized it and make different designs. So authenticity is very important because it ties me directly to my ancestors. It allows my cultural practices and traditions to thrive rather than just die out. When you keep using the molcajete instead of the fake bootleg cement one, it helps continue that tradition instead of possibly replacing it. The use of the molcajete is what connects me to my cultural identity. So cultural identity is a social construct. According to Libre Text, Chapter 2, Understanding Cultural Identity, it states that cultural identity is the values, the beliefs, the norms, and the expressive symbols, practices, that artifacts that we hold that can develop from the social relationships we experience throughout our lives. Not only that, but our cultural identity also defines who we are and what we stand for. The things that people we surround ourselves with, like family, peers, school, work, and even media, it influences our tradition, it influences our customs, it influences our language, our tools, and even the common experiences and knowledge. By instilling specific traits and characteristics, the passage of future from generation to the next ensures sustainability of that culture. The identity becomes all group members' identity. Cultural identity is authentic and it is organic, and it can be determined by who and what you surround yourself with. It's important to preserve culture and not to replace it or dilute it, since it creates and molds your personality and your identity, as well as your ethnic identity. So it's very important to keep it original. According to Kahan, who published Learn How the Molcajete Like the Mexican in May 2024, states that the word molcajete comes from the Nahuatl makati, which is a compound word from the word muli, which means sauce, and cacaxi, which means bowl. The stone mortar has been used in the Mexican kitchen for thousands of years. It was a unique way to grind down salsa and other condiments while adding special flavors using the volcanic rock. The porous rock allows for better tasting food while still allowing control of the final texture. In recent years, it had become a trendy way to serve food at restaurants. For most part, it remains like a staple for many Mexican family and homes. The molcajete releases flavors and natural oils in a way that a blender could never. The Mesoamericans used it for making salsa, used it as serving dishes for fiestas and family gatherings, and guess what? We still use it for that today. Food is more than just something people eat. It carries meaning. What people cook, how they cook it, and like what tools they use are all tied to their culture. These food practices help people express and maintain their ethnic identity. According to Chapter 2, Understanding Cultural Identity, ethnic identity refers to how someone views themselves in relation to racial or cultural groups, including the meanings and values they assign to group members. Personally, the molcajete gives me a sense of inclusion, and it also gives me a sense of belonging. That sense of belonging is my ethnic identity. Food practices are deeply intertwined to how people eat or how people see themselves and connect to their culture. Food can create a sense of belonging, especially for people connected to a specific heritage or community. The molcajete gives me a sense of inclusion and belonging, and it connects me to my personal identity. According to Irene 2025, who published Molcajete, an ancient tradition yet still a useful kitchen tool, My Slice of Mexico, explains how making food using the molcajete is an ancient technique it ties to personal identity, because food tradition and culture help shape personality identity. I could see how this is because in the past, I was very like-minded with the people I was associated with, which was, people who were not on the right path. So I tended to act more like them, compared to now where I surround myself with people who are like-minded and more educated. So I tend to have a personal identity that's more corresponded to them. This is important to highlight because this connects to personal identity, which shows how traditions and cultures are still prevalent in my daily experience as a person of Mexican descent. The molcajete is something that connects me to that culture, which in turn links me to my personal identity. Now, next I will describe the important traditions that keep the molcajete relevant in the Mexican culture. On a day-to-day basis, I make salsa with tortillas and quesito. It's very easy to do. You just soften the vegetables, serrano peppers, garlic, onions, and tomatoes, and you put it in here and you smash it up into the texture of your liking. It's very simple. Most people have the ingredients at their home. So it's something that's so doable. Now I will describe to you how the Aztecs incorporated the molcajete into their daily lives. Guess what? Same thing. They made it the same exact way. Thousands of years ago, they also put down vegetation in here, grinded it up, and served it to their family, just how we've been doing it today. According to Smith, who published At Home with the Aztecs, an archaeologist uncovers their daily life. Based on Smith's research, the Aztecs used the molcajete for daily cooking. This research was so fascinating because he didn't do research on popular mainstream history like the decapitation of heads, pyramids, and the nobles capturing all the townspeople and sacrificing them for the gods. No, his history was primarily based on the regular peasants and what the trash that they held in their backyard. His main treasure was silver needles, but what he also uncovered with that stuff was the molcajete. This was really interesting to me because I feel like that's kind of direct proof that, it's not just words in a history book, it's true. They did use this. Indigenous people, in fact, used this molcajete just how they've been using it now. This is important to say. This is important to highlight because this relates to social identity. Cultural food practices are one of the many ways that people learn to pass down traditions, culture, and values. Social identity, according to Libre Text Chapter 2, understanding cultural identity are the components of self and are primarily derived from involvement in social groups with which we are interpersonally committed to. For example, this may look like social identity being drawn from family or even from the community. Social identity differs from personal because memberships may be involuntary or involuntary. Like how my mother taught me how to use the molcajete and her mother taught her. It's a generational thing. You learn from your surroundings and people you surround yourself with. According to Language, Thought, and Reality, written by Benjamin Lee Whorf on Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, he published this in 1956. He states that the language that people speak has an influence on how they think and how they experience reality. This means that language like salsa and molcajete doesn't just describe words, it carries rich cultural meaning and shared identity that can help shape how Mexicans' identity is expressed. According to Francis S. Bernard, who published The Aztec of Central Mexico and Imperial Society in 2005, he states that Aztec women were primarily responsible for domestic work such as cooking and food preparation. This connects to Sapir-Whorf hypothesis because the language and traditions surrounded by the molcajete help shape cultural identity and everyday experiences within the Aztec society. As women use the molcajete, it helps shape cultural identity and everyday experience with the Aztec society. As women use the molcajete to prepare meals, they also pass down cultural knowledge, cooking practices, and indigenous traditions through both language and daily interactions. In this way, the molcajete became more than a kitchen tool. It became more as like part of a Mexican culture identity, and family roles were understood and expressed across generations. Finally, I would discuss how the molcajete is still prevalent in Mexican culture today. The molcajete represents a cultural survival in the face of erosion. According to Pletcher J.M. 1998, who published Que Vida en los Tamales, Food and Making of Mexican Identity, University of Mexico Press, this book describes how Spanish conquest tried to suppress indigenous cultures by whitewashing Aztec culture while simultaneously propping up the European customs. This was very interesting because during that time around the 1500s, they tried to suppress indigenous culture, indigenous people in general, but that didn't happen because you see the molcajete everywhere. You see it in restaurants, you see it at fiestas, you see it in your homes, you see it right here in your camera, right here in front of you. This is important because it highlights ethnocentrism and racial prejudice, which was committed against indigenous people and their cultures. Ethnocentrism is when an individual or group places one's own culture and corresponding beliefs, values, and behaviors in the center and in the position where it seems normal or right or better than, and they pretty much put everything else down. Racial prejudice, according to Libre Text Chapter 4, Cultural Bias, Racial Prejudice refers to the practice of holding false or negative beliefs of one racial group for the purpose of making another racial group using your own to appear superior or better than. Now that we are well versed on ethnocentrism and racial prejudice, let's talk more about race. Race is also socially constructed according to Libre Text Chapter 3, Social Construction of Cultural Identity. Race is a category based on differences in appearance that has been used to create hierarchies that privilege some and disadvantage others. Not only were the Aztec people oppressed, so were their cultural items, their foods, their clothes, language, the list goes on and on. And after all this, after all that oppression, ended on a positive note. At least the molcajete is still well and thriving, and despite everything, it's still very much in use. According to Ackelman, Lopez Flores, and Kamal Rosa Santamira, who published La influencia de la utensilios gastrimocios prehispánicos en las ambientantes de los restaurantes de cocina tradicionales y baraco programa in 2025. He highlights the use of the prehistoric molcajete in modern in modern restaurants. You see it everywhere. You see it in Mexican restaurants, family restaurants, etc., etc., etc. Despite colonizers who tried to, in a way, suppress the indigenous use of molcajetes, it's still practiced and valued today. For example, it was once marginalized and it was considered lesser and considered it was considered lesser. Now it's considered a value Mexican symbol of cultural identity. When Europeans, especially the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire led by Hernán Cortés, arrived in Mesoamerica, he came here hoping to dominate military and politically. It also extended to everyday life as well. It suppressed the indigenous food, the life, the spices, and the cooking practices. Controlling what people ate and how they prepared it became a way to suppress Aztecs' identity and so much more. One way of oppression was devaluation of indigenous foods and ingredients. Staples like corn and beans and chili peppers and cocoa beans were central to Aztec culture, and it was also nutritious for them, but it was deemed lesser and inferior compared to European foods like wheat and things like that nature. For example, wheat bread was promoted over corn tortillas, if you can believe that. This created pressure for indigenous people to kind of abandon their food systems in favor of European ones. At the same time, colonizers selectively adopted certain indigenous ingredients, like for example, the cocoa and vanilla. They decided this was a luxury, that this was delicious, and they even made a delicious drink from it. So it just comes to show that the Europeans kind of picked and choose what was great and what wasn't. But we won't go there, that's for another day. Despite all this, the raza still lives on, and so does the molcajete. Now that we have talked about race being socially constructed, we will discuss how women were the ones doing all the cooking. According to Butler J. 1999, Gender Trouble, Feminism, and Subversion of Identity explain that constant repetitive social behavior is a direct link to reinforced ideas about feminism. For example, women doing majority of the cooking in the Aztec society have created a social expectation which kind of morphed into like a permanent position. The molcajete doesn't just symbolize cooking, it also shows how gender roles and sexuality were created in order to keep women in the kitchen and to maintain cultural practices. Gender is an identity based on internalized cultural notions of masculinity and femininity that is constructed through community and interactions according to Libre texts. Sexuality is related to cultural and identity in important ways that extend beyond sexual orientation. Just as race is more than the color of the skin, gender is more than one biological and psychological manifestation of masculinity and femininity. Sexuality isn't just physical. Now that I have discussed the origins of my cultural artifact, the molcajete, I will summarize the key points and leave you with my final thoughts. First, I highlighted the Aztec origins and I discussed the authenticity, which connects me directly to my Aztec ancestry, my cultural identity, my ethnic identity, my personal identity. All these things work together to create my personality. Next, I explained how the molcajete was used on a daily basis while showing you how traditions are passed down through generations, through socialization, and how sexuality and gender played a role in feminism and masculinity, which is deep-rooted trait in modern traditional families today. Finally, I discussed how the molcajete survived despite years of oppression and continue to thrive in modern Mexico culture today. So, as I conclude, molcajete is a kitchen tool as well as a symbol of identity and traditional values. For me, it symbolizes resilience from years of cultural oppression. It also symbolizes my connection to my heritage, personal and ethnic identity, as well as my indigenous culture. Despite the efforts of the colonizers who tried to silence my culture, the molcajete lives on. It is preserved through me and my everyday practices of simply making salsa. I will continue to stain the air with the smells of garlic, onion, and serrano peppers to engrave a long-lasting, wonderful memory that my children too will experience. Thank you. And then for the camera, hold on. So they're still here. They're still here.